Last year, we were very successful in retooling the brownfield cleanup program in the state. I haven't noticed, were there any changes proposed in the budget this year to the brownfield program?
We have no changes proposed in the budget this year.
All right, I didn't think so. Thank you. With regard to a couple of the items that you mentioned in your testimony, on the resiliency planning of, I think you said $32.5 billion for adaptation and mitigation to climate change. Can you provide a little detail on how those dollars will be awarded, what criteria there are, and who's eligible to receive those monies?
On the resiliency planning
Yes.
line? So that's a $2 million line. It's grants that go out to, actually a DOS program, grants that go out to communities to update and modernize their local waterfront revitalization plans, which is a critical tool to help communities adapt to a changing climate. Also will help them comply with anything that comes out of the Community Risk and Resiliency Act, which the legislature passed a couple of years ago.
So that is specifically to waterfront revitalization?
Yes.
Are there any limitations on what communities are eligible for it or not eligible for it?
On that line, I could confer with my colleagues at DOH. The limitations would be focused on waterfront and the extent to which any climate change work is done from the waterfront outwards into the communities and the watersheds that are impacted.
All right, but there's no demographic criteria
No.
for communities that need to be met?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. With regard to the water infrastructure projects, and that was changes we did last year in the EFC, providing grants in addition to the lower no-interest loans that the EFC has traditionally provided.
Right.
We're doing an extra $100 million this year as your proposal in the budget.
Yes, sir.
I think that has been an extremely successful program so far in what we did last year, and it's helping our governments stay within their tax caps and get some of these projects started with that extra grant money in addition to the low and no interest loans that were available there. Are there any limitations on what types of communities can receive those grants at this point?
No, all municipalities are eligible to receive those grants. There's a scoring process through the application process at EFC. Certain credit is given to hardship communities, communities that have CSO discharge problems. But this is a grant program available to all municipalities that have needs with wastewater they have to demonstrate.
In addition to the added $100 million this year, is there any change in the criteria for awarding those?
We don't expect any changes to the criteria. It worked very well this first year.
How much of the $200 million from last year has been spent, and how much remains to be awarded, or was that all awarded last year?
We actually, in year one, we only made $50 million out of that pot available for communities. We added to that an additional $25 million that came to us from the federal government. So it was actually a $75 million pot in year one, and all of that was spent and awarded.
Okay. So then, is it accurate to say then that 150 of that initial 200 is going to be reappropriated this year?
That's correct.
Plus another 100 million?
Plus another 100.
And that will also be eligible for some type of federal match to amplify that amount?
We are still looking into whether or not we can add federal dollars to that. That appeared to be a one-time shot.
Okay. With regards to seeker, there's been a great deal of discussion surrounding seeker, and I know that myself and you have spoken about this with seemingly endless processes that continue on certain projects without meeting a resolution. I know that the department has been discussing considering some changes to help streamline those efforts and provide some definity on how long, some definitions as to how long the processes may take, and some more certainty for individuals, industry, companies, whatever, that are seeking to get a project approved. And is there anything in the budget at this point with regards to any proposed changes to seeker?
There's nothing in the budget, sir. No.
When do you anticipate that you may be coming out with some seeker recommendations.
Senator, seeker is obviously an important law that's helped to protect New York's environment. We recognize that there are aspects of the law that can be streamlined, and we have we heard from stakeholders from the environmental community all the way through to the regulated community about with their certain ideas. We have a package of regulations, draft regulations that we're working on right now. We expect to release those for public comment shortly.
The budget as proposed by the executive with regard to DEC, is it calling for any increasing staff levels this year?
No, Senator, it's flat.
Now, with the delay in a lot of the decision-making, from my perspective, on significant projects, the delay is bad for industry and business and how long these things get dragged out. It's bad for the communities that may support or oppose a project. And, you know, we have one significant project in my district with surrounding the underground storage of LPG, which we're now up to somewhere around 500 arrests of people protesting this facility that is dragged on for 6 or 7 years now. And I every year I'm a little dumbfounded as to why the department isn't asking for more resources to provide staff to be able to more expediently handle these types of major issues. Now, another one that's pending now is the Constitution pipeline, which has received all the federal approvals and is now just hung up with DEC. And without the request or what I see as a need for further staffing at DEC, these decisions just seem to drag out longer and longer and longer, and I don't think it's appropriate or fair to either side, whether you support or oppose a project in this, and more timely decision-making would be more warranted. Can you address those concerns?
Well, on the LPG project, that matter right now, as you know, is with our administrative law judge in a formal proceeding. I expect to have a decision from the judge within the next few months. And as I'm the ultimate decider on that project, I can't weigh in on its merits. I will say, though, that the submissions were extensive and timely, and I know that's why it's taken quite a bit of time to work through the process. On Constitution Pipeline, it is a large proposed project, 124-mile pipeline, 99 miles of which is in New York, many, many stream crossings and wetland crossings. Our department has been working very hard to understand the full impacts of the Constitution Pipeline. It is taking time, but I'm not going to pressure my department to move more quickly than they believe is warranted to complete their required hard look of the project.
Last question, I think, for now, unless I think it's something for another round. But you mentioned the environmental justice grants that are out there. I think you said $7 million. And you mentioned air quality monitoring, which was an issue that was raised recently with seemingly lack of monitoring stations in the southern tier. And the monitoring station that I believe is in the Binghamton area really is nothing further east than that along the southern tier for that. Can you explain, first of all, how the environmental justice grants are going to be awarded, what criteria there is for those, and what your thoughts are on air quality monitoring in the southern tier?
Of course. On the EJ grants, this is a project we launched last year with the legislature's help. It was $1 million line last year, so this year the total line is $7 million. We expect that we're going to be doubling the grant program within that. It will go to the same types of grants that we awarded last year, $50,000 maximum on each grant, and that was very popular last year. The balance of the EJ line will go to fund projects like air monitoring in urban areas, and we're going to work with the regulated community, the environmental justice community, to make sure that those grants are channeled to local air monitoring projects that have been requested. As to air monitoring statewide, we actually have 57 stations statewide, which is more than double what the EPA has asked of us. It's a strong program. We have a talented and dedicated staff that manage it. In the southern tier, there is one run by the state, and I know that there are also two that are not run by the state that we either are or will be drawing information from. I don't have the exact locations for you, but it's southern tier area. So it's painting a good picture of air quality in New York State, and as I mentioned in the beginning, the state's vital signs on air are trending in the right direction. We are seeing significant improvements since 2005 in all of the air pollutants that are of concern to us. And we'll continue to look at that hard, and we'll continue to look at how we space our air monitors across the state.
Now, finally, on the environmental justice grants, just to wrap up, are there any specific community demographic requirements or limitations for a community being eligible for such a grant?
I believe that environmental justice communities are defined in the law, and we would continue whatever definition we used last year, which was proven to be very effective.
Thank you, Commissioner.